even from a dark night, songs of beauty may be born. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Cross Street Chapel's Sunday service. I'm grateful for your presence here, for those who have joined us in person, as well as those who might be watching or listening online. And I hope that whatever it is that you've come seeking in this space, be it a time of joy and celebration, of repose and perhaps longing or sorrow, if you need a space to shed some tears, perhaps you've come looking for a few words of wisdom, or just a chance to connect with one another or with the divine. Whatever you've sought here, I hope it will be found as well as a warm community. This past Wednesday marked International Women's Day, and so today we take a special moment to recognize the challenges and experiences that women face in society, in the world, in their own lives. I'm really grateful for all the women who have, in this congregation, who have volunteered and agreed to speak, some from their own words and some from the wisdom that they have gleaned in their lives from elsewhere. So we began with the words of Mary Ann Radmacher. We turn to Laura Teresa Marquez for our call to worship. May our effort, confidence, and concern for others be the altar from which we pray for personal abundance. Our effort, our confidence, and our concern for others be that altar. Amen. And let us sing our first hymn in the Purple Book, number 62, Alicia Carpenter's Here We Have Gathered, hymn number 62. I should add the prelude was somehow not included in the printed order of worship. It was a prelude from Clara Schumann, so thank you, Aaron, for that. We turn to a quick reflection, these are the words from the Reverend Christine Robinson, entitled Listening. We listen to other people a lot. We listen to pass the time, to get information, to be entertained. We listen waiting for our turn to speak. We listen because it is expected of us. Most of the time, we don't listen deeply, even when our intent is to be helpful. We think we are listening, but we are spending most of our energy thinking about things to say that are encouraging or insightful. We are often surprised when our helpful comments end the sharing, or when the speaker says, "I don't need you to solve my problem. I just want you to listen." Why is it so difficult to just listen? Perhaps because we have a hard time believing that it is simply our presence that helps, rather than our thinking and advising. Our open hearts do the healing, rather than our carefully chosen words. But most of us haven't experienced this. That doesn't mean the listening is passive. It's hard work to listen with an open heart rather than an analyzing mind. It requires putting aside judgment, categorization, and evaluation, and instead just hearing the story that is told and the feelings behind it. Some people say they can feel themselves shift from their minds to their hearts when they are listening. Some describe deep listening as a sacred experience. Christine Robinson's listening, and may we have that capacity today to listen deeply, to shift it, to make it powerful and holy and sacred. But first, let us recite our covenant, which is printed in the order of worship and will appear online for those at home. We gather here in sacred fellowship to witness the fullness of our lives and all life, to hold and be held, tell stories and listen, to be renewed and renew the world. We speak with care and patience. We act with gentleness and compassion. We forgive each other and ourselves. In faith that we build beloved community, we renew our covenant today. Amen. So I invite the Reverend Dr. Ann Peart to come forward with our first contribution, which I will let her introduce.
Please forgive the rather dry title that appears in the order of service. It's based on the title of a chapter that I've just written, or at least I wrote last year, but in a book which is coming out next month, which I think will be one of the most important Unitarian books, possibly of this decade. It's called Cherishing the Earth, Nourishing the Spirit, and it's edited by my friend Maria Curtis, who used to come here when she was training for the ministry in Manchester. And it will come out next month at our annual Unitarian meetings. And writing the chapter on ecofeminist theologies was the most interesting and challenging thing I did last year, I think. So I'd like to share a little of it with you. I begin with an experience that Peter and I both shared, because we were both involved in the feminist theology working party. And I write, looking back at growing together, the report of the Unitarian Working Party on Feminist Theology, published in 1984, I'm horrified to find that, although I was a member of that working party, there is no overt mention of ecological concerns. Perhaps the most relevant pointer to a more ecological way of thinking was offered by Joy Croft. We are brought up to analyse our world by looking for distinctions, differences, limits, divisions. There is a complementary perspective, sometimes called holistic, which is familiar to many women, but we are encouraged to think of as woolly-mindedness. It seeks out the connections, the common and the unifying factors. The cultivation of such a mode of thinking will help heal the divisions among us. When Unitarian women began to explore feminist theology in the early 1980s, we were clearly aware of the importance of the natural world. In a service on Midsummer's Day at Golders Green Unitarians in 1981, we, as members of the recently formed local Unitarian Women's Group, led a solstice service which began with these words: "Together we take a journey back to that time when Mother Earth was revered as a sacred giver of life, loved and worshipped by all who understood her. Her rhythms were sacred, and her abundant life-giving force was in each woman." But the Feminist Theology Working Party, which included 3 members of the newly formed women's group, clearly failed to integrate the desire for a women-centred or nature-centred spirituality with the search for a feminist theology. As someone with a degree in geography and half a lifetime's experience of making connections with factors influencing the physical and human features of our world, I am disturbed, to say the least, by the absence of any reference to ecological understanding in the report. My geographical training came well before my feminist consciousness was raised in the early 1980s. But as one of a small minority of women students in Cambridge University in the 1960s, when only about 10% of the undergraduates were female, I was aware of at least some of the disadvantages in being female. Both my geographical experience and my time with the Ecumenical Partnership for Theological Education at Luther King House have led me to take a contextual approach in which individual experience is valued as a prime theological resource. Although I can only speak from my own experience, I think it's imperative to extend this approach to value the experience of others, to try to understand their otherness, and maybe to include the natural world in this appreciation. After all, the context in which all humans live on is the physical earth, our much troubled planet. I see ecofeminist theology as a branch of liberation theology, which has the aim of not only describing a scheme of thought and belief, but of changing the world in order to reduce injustice and bring about a fairer and more sustained planet.
Thank you, Anne. As you say, this will likely be the most important book in the decade, for the decade, and available. Thank you. We turn now to our second hymn, which this time is in your green book. Divinity is round us, never gone from earth or star. Sophia Leon Faus's Divinity is round us, hymn number 52. Our second contribution comes from Sarah Hasanie, who will be speaking about Mamie and Emmett Till.
The reading I have chosen today comes from a woman named as Mamie Till Mobley. Mamie's story has stayed with me in my mind ever since I first learnt about it a few months ago. She was an activist and a teacher against racial hatred who forever changed the course of the American Civil Rights Movement. Mamie, originally from Mississippi, USA, migrated with some of her family to Chicago for a better life, as life for Black people living in the South was very hard. They were denied basic rights, there was a very strict and rigid racial order, and there were many other restrictions in place imposed by racial discrimination. Mamie and her son Emmett had a nice life living in Chicago. In the summer of 1955, 14-year-old Emmett was on his summer break from school when he was invited by his uncle to visit Mississippi and spend some time with his cousins there. Emmett was overjoyed by the idea of going on holiday and seeing the place where his family originally came from. Although Mamie was very hesitant at first about this holiday, she reluctantly agreed to let Emmett go. Emmett, having lived in Chicago his whole life, had been shielded by the realities of harsh racism that existed in the South. In Chicago, he had been accustomed to regularly interacting with white people and classmates, and he did not see himself as any different. A few days before his trip, Mamie had a talk with her son and began to prepare him on how to behave around white people. She instructed him to say yes sir and no ma'am, and to step off the footpath if a white woman was walking towards him, and to make sure that he lowered his head until she passed. The message was clear that he was to show respect and subordination to white people as a Black male in the South. After arriving in Mississippi, Emmett, like any 14-year-old boy, just wanted to have a nice holiday and was busy enjoying himself with his cousins in this strange but exciting place. It is hard to say to what extent he had taken on board his mother's warnings about race-related social norms in the South. It wasn't until one day when he and his cousins nipped into a local shop to buy some sweets that Emmett's fate would take a turn for the worse. Emmett was in the shop on his own while his cousins hung around playing cards outside. This was one of the very few shops in the area that sold goods to Black people. As he paid for his sweets and was walking out, he smiled at the white woman behind the counter and said, "Bye, baby," as he was leaving the shop. The woman ran out with a gun after him, which frightened Emmett and his cousins, and they all jumped in their car and drove off in a panic. As it turns out, the woman would then tell her husband that Emmett had made sexual advances and comments towards her. A few days later, Emmett was kidnapped in the middle of the night from his uncle's house by the woman's husband and brother-in-law. Emmett's auntie and uncle tried to dissuade his kidnappers from taking him by offering them money, but this was to no avail. That same night, Emmett was taken to a barn, violently beaten and brutally murdered by these evil men, and his dead body dumped into a nearby river. His body was sent back to his mother in Chicago, and it was unrecognizable due to the brutality and violence that had been inflicted on him. It is likely that Emmett's murder, like that of other African Americans during this era, would have gone unnoticed if it weren't for his mother Mamie's decision to hold an open casket funeral. Emmett's funeral was attended by 100,000 people and was an alarming wake-up call to all American people and people around the world of the violent reality of racism. This story is very tragic in that Emmett's killers were never punished for his murder, and they were found innocent in court. And Carolyn Bryant, the woman that accused Emmett, admitted many years later that she had lied about him, and which in turn had led to his murder. 1 year after his murder, his killers publicly admitted in a magazine interview that they had tortured and murdered him, knowing that under state laws they were safe because they could not be tried twice for the same crime. Emmett's murder is one of the biggest miscarriages of justice, but it is also what set the wheels in motion for the American Civil Rights Movement. Mamie went on to become a powerful speaker and teacher and a very important activist. Her lifelong commitment to getting justice for her son and to fighting racial hatred right up until her death in 2003 is truly remarkable. And as a mother myself, words cannot express the admiration that I have for Mamie, for all her courage and strength that she showed and all the lives that she touched while struggling with her own grief. She concluded her autobiography by saying, "Although I have lived so much of my life without Emmett, I have lived my entire life because of him." So, now that I have told you a bit about Mamie Till Mobley, I would like to conclude by sharing with you a short reading from her memoir, The Death of Innocence. Oh God, how blessed I have been to have taken part in something as significant as our national debate. I have come to realize that we are all here for a purpose, and we have unique gifts to share with the rest of the world. I have enjoyed a full, rich, meaningful life because I was able to discover my reason for being and to perfect my gifts in fulfilling my purpose and touching so many lives in the process. Hopefully, I have left each one just a little bit better than I found it. Hopefully, I have made a difference. That is, after all, how our lives are measured, by how many other lives we touch and inspire, by how much of life we embrace, not by what we reject, but by what we accept, not by what we judge. Still, even with this understanding of a lifetime, the tears do flow from time to time, but I see much more clearly now through my tears, and that is a good thing. Rainy days always help us appreciate the sunny ones so much more, don't they? Besides, it is in crying that we are able to let go. In letting go, I have experienced what it is like to bring hope from despair, joy from anguish, forgiveness from anger, and love from hate. And if I can do it, I know anyone can. And if everyone does it, just imagine how much better we can all be. With each day, I give thanks for the blessings of life, the blessings of another day, and the chance to do something with it. Something good, something significant, something helpful, no matter how small it might seem. I want to keep making a difference. Although I am much more aware now of the limits of my own life, I am not afraid. My son has taught me so much about facing all aspects of life with courage. That's Mamie Till Mobley, The Death of Innocence.
Thank you, Sarah. And invite Sonia to come forward with a reading of her own.
Right. Countless women have worked and continue to work tirelessly to improve the lives of animals. Can you hear me? These compassionate and determined women include campaigners and activists such as anti-vivisectionist Frances Power Cobb, writer and campaigner Bridget Brophy, photojournalist and activist Joanne MacArthur, and rescuers and advocates such as world-class athlete and sanctuary founder Fiona Oakes, undercover investigator and sanctuary founder Wendy Valentine, and Jean Pink, the founder of the campaigning organization Animal Aid. One of the above, Bridget Antonia Brophy, was a British author, literary critic, and polemicist. She was an influential campaigner who agitated for many types of social reform, including homosexual parity, vegetarianism, humanism, and animal rights. She died of multiple sclerosis in 1995. She was passionate about the cruelty in animal farming, in factory farming, and wrote that, "Whenever people say we mustn't be sentimental, you can take it they are about to do something cruel. and if they add, "we must be realistic," they mean they are going to make money out of it. These slogans have a long history. After being used to justify slave traders, ruthless industrialists, and contractors who had found that the most economically realistic method of cleaning a chimney was to force a small child to climb it, the slogans have now been passed on, like an heirloom, to the factory farmers. We should remember that animal exploitation, factory farming, and abuse is only made possible by the exploitation of female animals and their ability to have babies. Being artificially and forcibly impregnated and separated from their calves are constants for cows on dairy farms. Unable to express their natural instincts, mother and baby will call out to each other. Mother pigs are still confined in farrowing crates, lying on their sides, unable to move freely or bond with their piglets. And these piglets are taken away from them when they are just a few weeks old, into appalling conditions and bred for meat, of course. Hens are selectively bred to produce more eggs than their bodies can cope with, causing them pain and illness. Those poor mothers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. We now have a musical interlude. Catherine is unfortunately unable to be with us today. She's not feeling well, and I'm afraid neither is Thomas. But the piece she had chosen to contribute was Claude Ariou's Sonatine. Now, that might sound, Cloud might sound a bit strange to include in the International Women's Day service, but this is the pen name of Louise Marie Simon, who's a 20th century French composer. So this is the first movement of her Sonatine for flute and piano. you to Catherine. We turn now to our next hymn in the Green Book, number 138, To Help the Prophet to Be Bold. The name in the book is Louise Guggenberger, but it was written by the same person as Louisa Bevington, and that was her maiden name and the name she preferred to be known by. So Louisa Bevington's hymn number 138. I now invite Anna to come forward with the Carol Ann Duffy poem, The Map Woman.
Dame Carol Ann Duffy, born 23rd of December 1955, is a Scottish poet and playwright. She is a professor of contemporary poetry at Manchester Metropolitan University and was appointed Poet Laureate in May 2009, resigning in 2019. She was the first female poet, the first Scottish-born poet, and the first openly gay poet to hold the Poet Laureate position. This is The Map Woman by Professor Carol Ann Duffy, DBE. A woman's skin was a map of the town where she'd grown up from a child. When she went out, she covered it up with a dress, with a shawl, with a hat, with mitts or a muff, with leggings, trousers or jeans, with an ankle-length cloak, hooded and fingertip-sleeved. But birthmark, tattoo, the A to Z street map grew, a precise second skin, broad if she binged, thin when she slimmed, a précis of where to end or go back or begin. Over her breast was the heart of the town, from the market square to the picture house. By way of St Mary's Church, a triangle of alleys and streets and walks, her veins like shadows below the lines of the map, the river and artery snaking north to her neck. She knew if you crossed the bridge at her nipple, took a left and a right, you would come to the graves, the grey-haired teachers of English and history, the soldier boys, the mayors and councillors, the beloved mothers and wives, the nuns and priests, their bodies fading into the earth like an old print on a page. You could sit on a wooden bench as a wedding pair ran, ringed from the church, confetti skittering over the marble stones, the big bell hammering hail from the sky, and wonder who you would marry and how and where and when you would die, or find yourself in the coffee house nearby, waiting for time to start, your tiny face trapped in the window's bottle-thick glass like a fly. And who might you see, short-cutting through the grove to the square, that line there, the edge of a fingernail pressed on her flesh, in the rain, leaving your empty cup, to hurry on after calling their name? When she showered, the map gleamed on her skin, blue-black ink from a nib. She knew you could scoot down Greengate Street, huddling close to the High House, the sensible shops, the Swan Hotel, till you came to the Picture House, sat in the musty dark watching the Beatles, run for a train, or Dustin Hoffman screaming, "Elaine, Elaine, Elaine," or the Spacemen in 2001 floating to Strauss. She sponged, soaped, scrubbed, the prison and hospital stamped on her back, the park neat on her belly, her navel marking the spot where the empty bandstand stood, the river again heading south, clear as an operation scar, the war memorial facing the railway station where trains sighed on the platforms, pining for Glasgow, London, Liverpool. She knew you could stand on the railway bridge, waving goodbye to strangers who stared as you vanished into the belching steam, tasting future time on the tip of your tongue. She knew you could run the back way home. There it was on her thigh, taking the southern road, then cutting off to the left. The big houses anchored behind their calm green lawns, the jewels of Conkers falling down at your feet, then duck and dive down Nelson and Churchill and Kipling and Milton Way until you were home. She didn't live there now. She lived down south, abroad, en route, up north, on a plane or train or boat, on the road, in hotels, in the back of cabs, on the phone. But the map was under her stockings, under her gloves, under the soft silk scarf at her throat, under the chiffon veil, a delicate braille. Her left knee marked the grid of her own estate. When she knelt, she felt her father's house pressing into the bone, heard in her head the looped soundtrack of then, a tennis ball repeatedly thumping a wall. An ice cream van, crying and hurrying on, a snarl of children's shrieks from the overgrown land where the houses ran out. The motorway groaned just out of sight. She knew you could hitch from junction 13 and knew of a girl who had not been seen since she did, had heard of a kid who'd run across all 6 lanes for a dare before he was tossed by a lorry into the air like a doll. But the motorway was flowing away, was a roaring river of metal and light. Cheerio, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, ciao. She stared in the mirror as she got dressed, both arms raised over her head, the roads for east and west running from shoulder to wrist, the fuzz of woodland or countryside under each arm. Only her face was clear, her fingers smoothing in cream, her baby blue eyes unsure as they looked at themselves. But her body was certain, an inch to the mile, knew every nook and cranny, cul-de-sac style, back road, high road, low road, one-way street of her past. There it all was, back to front in the glass. She piled on linen, satin, silk, leather, wool, perfume and mousse and went out. She got in a limousine, the map perspired under her clothes. She took a plane, the map seethed on her flesh. She spoke in a foreign tongue, the map translated everything back to herself. She turned out the light and a lover's hands caressed the map in the dark from north to south. Lost tourists wandering here and there, all fingers and thumbs as their map flapped in the breeze. So one day, wondering where to go next, she went back, drove a car for a night and a day till the town appeared on her left. The stale cake of the castle crumbled up on the hill, and she hired a room with a view and soaked in the bath. When it grew dark, she went out, thinking. She knew the place in the back of her, like the back of her hand, but something was wrong. She got lost in arcades, in streets with new names, in precincts and walkways, and found that what was familiar was only facade. Back in her hotel room, she stripped and lay on the bed. As she slept, her skin sloughed like a snake's, the skin of her legs like stockings, silvery, sheer, like the long gloves of the skin of her arms, the papery camisole from her chest, a perfect match for the tissuey socks of the skin on her feet. Her sleep peeled her, lifted a honeymoon thong from her groin, a delicate bra of skin from her breasts, and all of it patterned A to Z, a small cross where her parents' skulls grinned at the dark. Her new skin showed barely a mark. She woke and spread out the map on the floor. What was she looking for? Her skin was her own small ghost, a shroud to be dead in, a newspaper for old news to be read in, gift wrapping, litter, a suicide letter. She left it there, dressed, checked out, got in the car. As she drove, the town in the morning sun glittered behind her. She ate up the miles, her skin itched like a rash, like a slow burn, felt stretched as though it belonged to somebody else. Deep in the bone, old tunnels, old streets tunneled and burrowed, hunting for home.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you to everyone who's contributed with such words of insight and power. I'm grateful for the women in this congregation. We come to a point of sharing of candles of joy and sorrow. If you wish to share something, you can light a candle and come to the microphone to say a few words. If you are online, type into the chat box. I will read your message out. You are, of course, invited to light a candle in silence if you wish. And as always, if you wish to remain seated, know that your presence here is enough. Just your presence, as we said at the start, nothing more. And of course, this portion of the service will be removed from the final recording of the broadcast. For all those joys and sorrows here spoken, and those that remain silently in our hearts. Let us turn now to a time of prayer with these words of the Reverend Kendall Gibbons. Let us hold lovingly in our thoughts all the people of the earth, those who are consumed by mutual hatred and bitterness, those who make bloody war upon their neighbors, those who oppress their siblings with any form of tyranny, and all those who suffer in subjection, cruelty, and injustice. Let us recognize our solidarity with all the outcast, with the downtrodden, the abused, the deprived, and our common humanity with all who bear the responsibilities of leadership and power. Let us remember humanity's ancient and universal dream of peace, that we live together in harmony, no one exploiting the weak, no one hating the strong, each of us working out our own destiny, self-respecting and unafraid. May we seek to be worthy of freedom, free from institutional wrong, free from individual oppressions and contempt, pure of heart and hand, despising none, defrauding none, giving to all people in all encounters of life the honor due to those who, like us, are children of earth's great love. Amen. And so we now enter into a period of silence for reflection, meditation, contemplation, and personal prayer. Thank you, Brian. A few notices before we sing our final hymn and conclude our service. If you're in need of pastoral care, please speak with me or write to minister@crossstreetchapel.org.uk. You can let me know as well if you're new and wish to join our mailing list. We send out about 1 or 2 messages a week, just of chapel activities, including links for the online portions of our services. Please sign up and volunteer if you're interested in giving readings, in providing flowers, or assisting with the tea and coffee or the IT. How's the IT been today? We make it as easy and communicable as possible, so please do consider that, even if you are a bit sort of wary of technology. And if you just want to not do that, that's fine. There's plenty of other volunteer opportunities. Speaking of which, do we have anyone to help with the tea and coffee today? Thank you, Richard. We're grateful, of course, for any donations that can contribute to the chapel's mission. We have a retiring collection after the service, as well as envelopes if you're a UK taxpayer, so we can claim gift aid. If you're online, you can donate at justgiving.com/crossstreetchapelmanchester. In 2 weeks' time, it will be our AGM. That's the 26th. We'll have a shortened service followed by a shared meal. So if you're joining us for that and are able to contribute something, or if you have dietary requirements, please let us know so we can make accommodations. It's also a chance to hear about the chapel's past activities and upcoming plans, as well as our financial state, and having a chance to elect our new committee for the following year. So do join us on the 26th, tentatively from 12 to 2, but please do come for the service as well. And then the Friday after that, the 31st, is our Friday lunchtime recital. This month we welcome Ru Ying Wang, who is our normal Sunday musician. She's going to be delighting us with bassoon music. As you hear very often on Sundays. She's very talented. So please do join us for that. That's 1 p.m. It's free entry, but we're grateful for donations. And this month she's asked that the donations go to Cats Protection Charity. So that's the 31st at 1 p.m. Are there any announcements from the congregation? Please then join with me in singing our final hymn, Shelley Jackson Denham's We Laugh, We Cry, hymn number 193 in the Purple Book.
Thank
Thank you, Aaron, for the music. We thank Laura, who wasn't able to be with us today, for the flowers. Thank you, Joe, for the IT, Anna for greeting. Thank you to Anne, to Sarah, to Sonia, Catherine, and Anna for your contributions and readings. Thank you to Richard for the tea and coffee, and Sonia and Robin for the preparation. And thank you to all of you for creating and sharing worship today. We close with the words of Tess Ward. May the God who hangs her star over unexpected places lure us to the place we need to be, where new things must happen and we have to return home by another way. Amen.